Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. I'm Sarah Traver, I'm the director of Traver Gallery here in Seattle, and I am very pleased to be here with our featured artist, Preston Singletary. As I'm sure many of you know, Preston is known around the world for his contemporary work in glass using very traditional Tlingit designs and incorporating the traditional Tlingit stories into the glass medium. Preston, thanks again for showing with us. It's awesome to have your work in the gallery. Can you tell us a little bit about this show and your inspiration and some of the work in it?
Yeah. So the show title comes from this musical piece that I do with my band, which is I moonlight as a musician. So this was a lyric from actually a spoken word piece, the place where you go to listen. And for me, that just kind of, that's what I took as inspiration to, as I'm looking at the next 10 years of my career, I'm starting to think about the things that I want to do and really hone in on the stuff that I would like to accomplish over the next 10 years. And so this piece, the second piece, which is called Unassimilated, was another, taken from another song in our group, another spoken word piece called Earth Prayer. And it's a story about how Raven goes away, comes back after a long journey, and instead of tall trees, he sees all these buildings, and he doesn't really understand the landscape, where he came from or his family comes from. So he then discovers this log that's been washed up from onto the beach, and it's really heavy with all the salt water. And the metaphor of that is, the sorrow that that the natural world is, quickly disappearing for Raven. And so the sun is kind of warming this log and then drawing it out. So he's sitting on this log, and in the story he starts to cry with the log.
One of the things that you've been talking a little bit about to me is this idea of how to bring these traditional stories to a contemporary audience. Mm-hmm. Is this an example of that, or?
Yeah, I mean, this is like based on the music that I was doing, based on my whole thought process. Trying to identify the new stories of Raven, and if the culture had continued the way it was prior to contact, you would imagine that there would be all kinds of new stories that were being made.
Yeah.
That would but if we look at and we think about Raven as a spirit in the world somehow, that maybe he's still trying to affect changes within the world, positive changes, I like to think. So, so that's going to be the next chapter. So we'll have to stay tuned for that.
Cool. Well, let's look at some of the other work. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So these were I've done these before. There's a lot of questions at the opening about the lidded baskets, and they are. A little oversized for what they were traditionally. Often they were very small baskets with lids, but just kind of a fun expansion on the basket forms. I love the kind of the circular design on the top.
Yeah, it's really beautiful.
I've seen examples of curio shops where these were stacked up on edge, and kind of like pyramid, and like a giant pyramid. And so that's where I took a lot of inspiration for those lidded or the designs on the lids.
Yeah, and these lids do come off, right?
Yeah. They're fitted for.
It's beautiful.
So they actually function as a storage container if you want.
Yeah. And then this is a beautiful piece, Thunder Being.
Yeah, so based on a Thunderbird,
mm-hmm.
I've done some of these kinds of compositions, but I've made eagles and ravens, and so I decided that I haven't made Thunderbirds very often, but they are you know, I don't know a whole lot about the, it is a clan, the Thunderbird clan. And, you know, in the southern version of the Thunderbird, you know, these birds were mythological creatures that were so large they could pluck whales out of the ocean.
Wow.
I don't think it's the same up in the Tlingit territory, but in any case, what we do know is that they were, they flap their wings at sort of where the thunder sound comes from. Kind of a little bit of a generic explanation, but it was fun kind of working on this composition and trying to make this creature.
Yeah, and then beside it here, and I love the these pieces next to each other because you have this sort of repeated form here. This is the screen that you've done in collaboration with another gallery artist, Dick Weiss.
Dick Weiss, yeah. And yeah, so Dick and I are old friends, go way back into the 80s. And at one point I lived in his house. And so, you know, he proposed the idea of doing a collaboration. I had some ideas of putting some kind of abstracted form line and also a bit of a river theme. So it's supposed to give the feeling of a flow of water. And so working with Dick, he's got this is his wheelhouse. So I let him help kind of dictate some of the details and the glass that was used and what have you. So he's been busy working on these things, and they're fun to have. Yeah,
they're beautiful pieces. So it's leaded glass, and Dick typically uses glass from various sources. Some of it is from friends that are glass blowers that maybe have a piece that didn't work out, and so he'll use a section of that. Other pieces are antique glass. Other pieces are glass that for like architectural use, you know, so a really beautiful array of things there.
Yep.
Great.
Well, this is one of the, this is one that I gave the title, The Place Where You Go to Listen, and this is like a shaman figure, so he's kind of an emaciated shaman. He's kind of going through some kind of experience. I mean, the shaman on the Northwest Coast would, live in isolation and do extreme sort of rituals and fasting and, to sort of connect themselves to the spirit world and help lead the community and the tribe. And I put him on this oyster catcher rattle. So this is a mountain goat, and this is the oyster catcher here. It's kind of based on a traditional rattle that, lots of varieties of exist of this kind of form, but now I'm kind of reinterpreting it and creating it as a sculpture.
So you've incorporated real feathers in this piece. I know in some pieces you've used feathers from your father's fly tying tackle box.
That's right.
Is that
That's right.
what
Exactly.
these are from?
Yeah. I have a giant box of feathers that my father would use to tie flies with, and so it's, putting these into the sculptures now because there's such a variety of feathers that he left that I like to work with them when I can.
Yeah, and speaking of feathers, the piece next to it here is a feather form.
Yeah.
A little different from some of the feathers that we've shown previously in the gallery in terms of scale, and then also this is actually a blown form.
Yeah, so this is made from a blown bubble rather than a solid bits of glass, which are typical of the other feathers I've done. So I was trying to get a bigger scale with this, and just it was just, I had on a whim, I decided to make a piece like that. It was really fun to try out. It's the only one that I've made so far.
It's beautiful. The color on that piece is is subtle, and maybe it doesn't come through very well on the camera, but when it gets a little light behind it, it just absolutely illuminates.
Yeah, there's a transparent gray under there, and so it's kind of tone on tone. It's supposed to be a subtle kind of effect, is what I was going for.
Yeah.
So it also kind of relates a little bit to argillite, the Haida, stone carvings, that are all, black slate material. So I kind of like to think of it that way too.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's always kind of, working with earth tone colors. I did that for so long, and then I finally tried to break out of my color rut and start making, work with some of these brighter colors, but it makes everything a little bit different, a little bit more contemporary, I think.
Yeah, it does. I mean, and we see as we're walking through this show, there's actually quite a bit of bright color in here as well, or bright colors mixed with earth tones. There's these really beautiful, subtle combinations.
Yeah, a couple of amulet forms here. Obviously, more of a bear's tooth, and this is kind of like a bone or a piece of, or a prunt of some sort that could have been typically used. On a smaller version, might have been used as a little, necklace or amulet. But these ones are kind of the newest offering of that variety.
And using some, for glass enthusiasts that are watching, using some different techniques here too. So like using some encalmo here to create different layers of colors within the piece.
Yeah, so there was two different bubbles of glass that have been separated from the top and the bottom, and then this area, the black and red, was joined together as a band, and then continue the shaping process, sculpting and shaping is how we got that effect. I was trying out some. I like the variety, and just trying to mix it up, with as far as the presentation and the effect go.
Yeah, it's neat too how it goes from this transparent to totally opaque to back to transparent. It kind of creates this kind of shroud around the middle. Pretty.
Yeah, it's kind of like the assimilated one where we've got the color fade from one color to the next. I'm trying to figure out new color techniques that can, break out, make more variations. I guess kind of like this one too. This was another encalmo technique, where they were joined at one point. They were joined together in this direction, but then I switched the axis and stretched it out so it became more of a side-by-side encalmo. And working with those contrast of colors, you can create different effects and different animal symbols.
Yeah. Preston, you've been getting a lot of attention this last year. It's been a really significant year in your career with the Smithsonian show, which is now at the Chrysler Museum. There was a piece on CBS Sunday Morning. I think you got a big award from Artist Trust.
That's right.
Lots of different things happening. What's on the horizon? What are you working on now and looking forward to?
Let's see. Been doing a lot of music. Back to the music.
What's the name of your band, just so folks can find it?
Yeah, right. So the group is called Khuex. It's spelled Khueex. It means potlatch in the Tlingit language. And in this, in February, we recorded some soundtrack material. There's been a documentary film that's been more or less 10 years in the making. And so we made the soundtrack material, but we also recorded another album. We have one that's been delayed by COVID, so we've got basically 4 albums coming out in the next ongoing year. And this documentary film should be done, I think, hopefully by the fall. And that will be a good thing to wrap up after all this time. And but then work-wise, yeah, just kind of going into the studio with these new ideas and thinking about trying to bring more detail into the work and kind of, take more time and do different kinds of detailings, like this in Calmo, different, to get a different effect.
Yeah.
So that's been kind of my objective. And then there's a few public art things on the horizon that'll be put up. There's one going up this Friday in a retirement community called Panorama. And there'll be a series of panels that have steel and glass and lights inside.
Is that here in the Northwest?
It's down near Tacoma.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we're going to install at the Microsoft campus some of these giant raven sculptures on these poles, kind of flying through the campus, and that'll be this summer. Then later in the fall, the museum show will travel to Oklahoma.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it'll be opening in November, and so that's going to happen. And in between, we're going to try to squeeze in Dante and I are going to travel to the Czech Republic and do some work over there.
I heard about that.
So that'll be a fun, adventure. We always have a fun time traveling together.
Yeah. And then on top of all of that, I think you're working on a book.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. So this book is kind of. I don't know. It's not an autobiography. It's not a memoir. It's just kind of like notes to the memoir, so to speak. And it talks a lot about my, kind of how I got involved with glass, and my journey as an artist, so to speak, as a glass artist and musician, and the things that kind of fuel my creativity. I guess that sums it up pretty good.
Yeah, I mean that's actually maybe a nice segue. One of the wonderful things about this exhibition is it's actually paired alongside another exhibition, which is a memorial exhibition for Tony Hohola. And Tony was one of the very first Native artists to start using glass.
That's right.
And do you want to just talk a little bit about your relationship and who he was?
Yeah, so I met Tony in 1984. This was the first time I ever went to Pilchuck. And he and Larry Avocano were there. There's two Native artists and me. I wasn't really doing Native art at the time. I was just learning how to blow glass. But I met those guys, and I think somehow they kind of planted a seed in my head. This could be a direction. I mean, it was really fascinating to meet them both, because Larry, being from Alaska, was, and he's in Yupiat, and then Tony is from the Pueblos, Isla de Pueblo, and so he was there and had been working with glass, and he was just a really, really sweet person, really, really nice guy, and I really got to know him well. In fact, we had kind of back-to-back birthdays. It was me, and then Lino, Talia Pietra, and then Tony. So every year I would get a phone call from Tony. He would call me every year just to say happy birthday. And knowing that I was probably going to see him down in Santa Fe.
Which would be right around the same time, right?
Yeah, like just a few days later. But we always connected. He came up and worked with Dale quite a bit, and back up to Pilchuck, he was teaching at Hilltop, and so I can't say enough about him, because he was just such a great teacher, really good with kids. He really inspired the kids. He worked really well with them. He knew how to kind of like get into their mindset, and people felt comfortable around him, and he was just such an amazing energy and person to be around. And so definitely he'll be very missed because of his his legacy as one of the pioneers of for Native American glass blowers, and all of that you know, we lost him way too soon.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really striking what an impact he made. We had a celebration here the other night for the opening of the shows, and the show is really built around looking both at his art that he created, but also the art that he influenced by his work as a teacher and a mentor. And it's really impactful. It's really
I mean, the fact that he grew up on the reservation too, and then went to Santa Fe and learned about glass blowing, but then made his way up here. So he left his community to discover the glass. And I mean, so for me, it was, you know, glass kind of grew up around me, and he went to seek it out. And that was pretty radical at the time. A lot of the people who grew up on the Pueblo, they stay really close, and they don't. I remember him telling me that, you know, that some of the tribal members kind of distrusted him, like, well, why do you got to go? Why do you have to leave? Why are you leaving us? You know, why, you know, isn't this enough for you? And it was his calling to go and explore glass. And so, but he was a very traditional guy. I mean, it was when hunting season came, he was absolutely going to go hunting, and there's no two ways about it. So I love thinking about that and who he was, because he, you know, he had this foot in two worlds, you know, and he's pretty an amazing guy.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, and I hope that everybody is able to check out that exhibition as well. It's there's a wonderful little YouTube that we did with John Drury, the curator of that, which you can find on our YouTube channel too. And Preston, I don't know, you want to talk about any of the other pieces here?
Let's see. I know there was a question about the seal.
Yeah.
So this is kind of, you know, this is more of a anatomical seal, but typically these were used or made as grease dishes. So the seal was. They would make seal oil, and then they would make a dish, kind of like you dip your dried fish into it. So this isn't, you know, interpreted as a dish; it's more of a sculpture. But that is kind of what the seal means to the community. You know, it was hunted. They would eat them. And I mean, I've tried it myself. But I wouldn't call it my new favorite dish. No. It's very strange. It actually tastes very fishy, even though it's got a fleshy kind of texture to it. But anyways, that was my homage to a seal.
Yeah, it's a beautiful new
Spirit
piece.
of the sea, I called it.
And how about the piece next to it? This is a piece that you did in collaboration with another artist, Lisa Telford.
Yeah, so it's funny that I always meant to say something. This is actually the back side of the dress.
Oh.
But it actually has more interesting details going on. So she's kind of looking at the wall that's here. This is called Foam Woman, and this weaving was done by Lisa Telford, and she's a Haida weaver, traditional cedar bark and, well, spruce root cedar bark weaver. And she's a good friend of mine. I've known her for years. We've been in many different, you know, cultural gatherings together, and we actually made this I don't know, probably about 7 or 8 years ago. And I finally decided, okay, I'm going to finally finish the piece. So Foam Woman is this mythological person who you know, if you think of the foam, the sea foam that gathers at the beach, you know, on the edge of the beach, this is where Foam Woman kind of grew out of. And when I was reading about it, it said that she has multiple breasts and was able to nurture the clans. So she's often regarded as an origin stories around the clans, and it's as if she created the clan system. And so here we've got her clothed up in cedar bark, and she's rising up out of this watery base here. It's
a beautiful piece. It's a very different feel.
Yeah. So it's kind of a collaboration with Lisa. I hope Lisa gets to see it.
How about the red eagle piece here in the back?
Yeah, this is kind of, again, kind of like that interpretation of the Thunderbird with the wings, this, working with different compositions around this. But this is Eagle Boy, and so this is kind of this boy down here that is the eagle in this particular story was dropping fish to this boy, and he was kind of an outcast, but the village was experiencing famine, and so he brought these salmon to the people, and so more and more fish were delivered by the eagle, and so he created this kind of relationship with him, with this eagle, and so in the end he was allowed back into the community and was kind of celebrated as a unique individual who helped save the village from starvation.
Beautiful story. It's such a powerful piece. That that sort of orangey red color is really striking and different.
Yeah, that one turned out to be pretty punchy in its color.
Yeah. And then another beautiful form here. This one's also really beautiful color.
Yeah, this is another kind of, it's kind of like an amulet, like one of the print forms, but I wanted to create a little bit more of an organic shape. And then this kind of refers back to my modernist influences, where I think about Brancusi or Noguchi or somebody, like that, making these, very kind gestural
of bird
kind of
in
forms.
Space.
Yeah,
kind of.
Yeah. But then I put these, kinds of, put like a raven here, and then this little human figure kind of is, I don't know what's going on here, but there's Stillness was the title, and that was also where the title of the show comes from, that song we called Stillness, the place where you go to listen. And it kind of talks about, in the story it kind of talks about this person who's going out into nature and looking for, kind of a meditative space, and then kind of divining sort of creative thoughts.
Yeah, there's a number of really meditative, quiet pieces in this show. I really like that. Like, they allow for kind of an introspective space.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's always present in your work, a narrative or an implied narrative, but some of these pieces, and I think this one's a great example of that, is really also just about the form and the design, and it's not so much about a particular story necessarily. Yeah,
I mean, I like to leave them open for interpretation in some cases, and one of my uncles, my uncle Larry, was my middle name is Lawrence, so I was named after my uncle, and he was a big advocate of mine, and he asked me early on, do you ever write poems for your pieces, or I wasn't really making work at that time, but when we were talking about it and he was encouraging me, he was not Tlingit, but he was married into, to my aunt who is, and he was an engineer and very creative thinker, and he was really excited that I was endeavoring to do this, and he gave me a lot of ideas. And I think a lot of the titles that I've been doing for years are reflective of those kinds of non sequitur kind of random titles that leave it open to interpretation.
Yeah. They kind of prompt people to think.
Yeah, because every time, I mean, sometimes I'll go in with a very specific idea of what I want to do and what story I want to tell, or how it's going to look, and then sometimes I'll just start, putting lines down on a piece, and I turn it, and okay, then I can start to. It gives me a guideline to start to get into that zone of just drawing and making the lines flow together.
Yeah.
And that's how things come together for me.
Yeah. Thanks, Preston. You're giving a talk at Town Hall tonight.
That's right.
Which obviously will be past by the time people watch this video, but I'm sure will be available online for people to watch.
Yep.
And then we're doing an in-person artist talk as well, which we'll try and do some video of too. So that'll be available for folks to watch as well.
Yep.
Thank you. It's
All
really
right.
awesome to hear about the work and beautiful show.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.